to the Politicrat. I'm Omar Moore. It is Tuesday, April the 13th, 2021. On this edition of the Politicrat.
So that right there, it hurt him a lot. And when we went to the funeral, it's just, George just sat there at the casket over and over again. He would just say, Mama, Mama, over and over again. And I didn't know what to tell him because I was in pain too. We all were hurting. And he was just kissing her and just kissing her. He didn't want to leave the casket. And everybody was like, come on, it's going to be okay.
How do you measure a life? That was Philoneas Floyd testifying on Monday at the murder trial of Derek Chauvin, who killed Philoneas's brother, George. Last year, on Memorial Day, in Minneapolis. You'll be hearing more from Philoneas Floyd, and you'll be hearing from the aunt of Daunte Wright, who was killed on Sunday in Minnesota, not far away, actually, from where George Floyd was murdered. Amy Winehouse, back to black, and welcome to this edition of the Politicrat. Thank you very much for joining me on this daily affair, and I hope that you have been well and keeping well amidst all of the difficult, adverse, and troubling times that we are living in, and I hope that in your personal lives there are some really good things that you cherish and hold on to, and that you are thankful for, because that's really important with everything that's going on. We've got a pandemic, you've got things going on in your life that probably are challenging to you, and then you've probably got some really good things going on in your life. And it's important to hold on to all of that, because this is a really crazy world. It's a crazy, beautiful, wonderful, cruel world, and a violent one. And you have to feel a certain way about all those things as you do hold on to the things in life that please you, that fortify you. A walk, a run, a look at the nature that you may be living close to. If not, perhaps you're not too far away from it, or you're just grateful that the sun shines, or that the rain hits the window pane, or that there is fog, or that there is a warmer climate, or that it's nice and cool, or that you like cloudiness, or that you happen to have this view outside your window that's just absolutely splendid. There's so many things to be grateful for, that we have a planet that's still here despite the horrible violence being done to it. We still do have a planet, a semblance of one, with the horrible violence, as I said, being done to it, with the environment that we really need to continue to try to slow the effects down of climate change and global warming. We need to do all of these things, and we need to, again, find compassion and love. And also express your feelings. You have very clearly heard me do that on this podcast, not just over these last few days, but throughout. And it is a healthy thing to do. The healthy thing to do is to express yourself, is to express your feelings, and also to use your feelings to drive you to do things that will change situations in the ways that you can change them, to the extent that you can. There's so many ways that takes the form, that in which that form takes. And maybe I'm not articulating it the best way in the moment, but there are so many ways where your anger about an issue or about injustice or about anything, you can channel that into something that provides a springboard. For example, one of the things I think of immediately, and this is for the families who actually have lost somebody in these kinds of situations, is that they do either start some kind of fund, start some kind of association, some kind of organization or company that is dedicated toward honoring not only the memory of their lost loved one, but also to other people who are cut down like this so violently by the police. I mean, I think of George Floyd's Memorial Foundation. The George Floyd Memorial Foundation is the official organization for George Floyd and for scholarships and for all kinds of things that foundation is set up for. And it was set up by his family. So these are the kinds of things that I think are important. And it doesn't have to be that. For people who haven't lost someone, it could be maybe writing a book. It could be teaching. It could be running for office. It could be designing. I was going to say designing, not designing T-shirts. That's not what I was going. Although that might be something that you might use it for, and that's not what I use it for. But you could manifest your anger in so many ways. It could be by starting a podcast and just venting, but also not just venting, but also using the podcast or using a platform that you may have or invest in or may start to actually educate people and go through some of the things that can teach people. So that, there's so many things that we can do. And be angry. That is actually the message which I hadn't conveyed in these previous episodes. Be angry. You should be angry because that means you're sane. Honestly, and when I say that word sane, SANE, this is in a different context from mental health because although it's the same in the way as well, obviously. But I don't. I want to use this word very carefully because it could look to some people, or some people could hear this and view me as, or hear me attacking or denigrating mental health or people who have mental health challenges, which I can say that I'm not doing, but that may not be how you hear it. But what I am saying is that you should be angry about the things that are going on in this world that are unjust, that are cruel, that are violent. You should be angry about George Floyd being cut down or Breonna Taylor sleeping in a bed being cut down. You should be angry that the police aren't going to prison for any of this. You should be angry that in many cases they're not even being indicted for this. You should be angry that there's all this violence going on against black people, against brown people, Asian people being targeted and attacked and killed. You should be angry about that. And then we've got to try to think about how we use our anger to fight for change. And it's been done over and over again. You just look at the history. If people only decide to turn and crack open a book and actually study history, and you don't even have to do a book anymore. You go online, but I wouldn't. The way online is and the way, Wikipedia is just, really, it's a joke. And so many people rely on Wikipedia, and it is not the thing to rely on. You really have to do some research online, but also look at books. You have to. And I like to think that one of the things I do on this podcast is suggest books for you to read, is suggest things for you to look at, is suggest particular things for you to analyze, and also to talk about history because it's very important and very important. But you should be angry. You'd be, and to be angry about what you see going on in this world with COVID vaccinations that are only going to 10% of the world right now, with COVID vaccinations within a country where you've got governors like the Michigan governor, Gretchen Whitmer, basically begging President Biden, look, we need more vaccine here in Michigan. And there's a stockpile in this country. You should be angry about that, about Flint, Michigan, with drinking water that's still got lead in it, with Pittsburgh in Pennsylvania, same thing, Newark, New Jersey, with drinking water, the same thing, all three, and then other places all around the country, and it's affecting kids. Yeah, you should be angry about that. And it's also disproportionately affecting black and brown kids. So yeah, you should be angry about that. You should have your feelings around those things. And like I said on Twitter, at the Popcorn REEL last night, yeah, I am an angry black man. Anger is not my totality. That is not all of who I am. I do all kinds of things. I have all, other kinds of feelings. It's not only anger. And the society loves to try to pigeonhole you. So if they call you that, angry, that's a way for them to try to shut you down as a person and then get you to be all defensive about having feelings. It's the truth. That is how it's done. And so there's and then you've got a load of black folk going, well, I'm not an angry black woman. I'm not an angry black. Yes, you're angry. So what? You should be. This world is evil. And it's beautiful as well. There's beautiful things in the world and there's evil in the world. So yeah, when there's evil things going on in the world, kids being molested, priests and kids, and then everyday people doing the same kinds of things to kids, women being harassed on their jobs every day, and those stories aren't the ones we get to hear. We always get to hear about the powerful. Well, there's more everyday people on earth than there are powerful people, and let's start to hear those stories. I mean, that should anger you that the everyday person's getting this. So yeah, I'm angry. I'm angry about those things. And and of course I use the anger that I have in a way that's constructive and in a way that is designed to push things forward. And when you do work educating people, when you do work in your profession, or when you do work doing other things that try to spark people to do good things and advocate for their group, for their society, for a better place to live, for black people, a safer place to live, a more just place to live. Yeah, that's how you use that anger. There's so many different ways to do that. So I just want to say, if you weren't angry, there'd be something wrong with you, quite frankly. That's what I mean to say when I say to be angry about these kinds of evil things, these kinds of things in the world, is to be sane, is to be living in a rational manner. Because you'd be absolutely stark raving mad if you weren't angry about what's going on in the world, about vaccines being shut down, or vaccines not being allocated to the people who need them the most. And only now, when it's obvious that this has been going on forever, where there's always been inequities and always been discrimination against black people in terms of getting vaccines and treatments that would save their lives and help them. And, again, in the medical profession, when black people aren't being treated the way white people are. And there's been that for decades and centuries in the country. And now it occurs to you, we need to rush vaccine to black people and brown people. Really? Because they need, and you didn't realize this 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 50 years ago, that you needed to do that. So again, this is the thing. It's all about the rich and the whitest populations getting this vaccinations early, and getting the stockpile, and these countries getting it, these rich, whiter countries getting this vaccine first, and then the African continent, basically for the most part, isn't getting any. There's a few exceptions. South Africa, I think, is one of them. But basically, the African continent really is not getting any vaccination at all right now. And those are the populations in all of those countries on the continent of Africa that need this vaccine the most. And black people in this country need it the most. Brown people in the United States, Native Americans need this vaccine the most. So yeah, I'm angry about that. Yeah, I'm an angry black man. And I'm not going to run from that. But that is not all I am, you know? And that's what the society loves to do. It loves to pigeonhole you and get everyone to react to you in the way that they've defined you. So my answer to that, and yours might be a different answer, but mine is to define yourself. And my answer is define yourself. Don't let these people define you. I mean, they're going to define you no matter what. But in your work, in your life, and what you do, define who you are. And do not let someone else's definition or perception of you be the thing that you internalize and then act upon and take on, because that's just impossible. You've got to be you. You must be who you are. And that's the most important thing. Chicago with Hard to Say I'm Sorry. That was one of the songs that Chicago does some really good stuff over the many decades, and that's one of my favorites. Although I do love also the song If You Leave Me Now, which was just terrific. 1976 or 77. Terrific song, which I will play a little bit of at some point, I guess. Not in today's episode. But thank you very much again for being part of the Politicrat Daily Podcast. And there is more merchandise coming, as there is every day. And summertime is going to be here before we know it, but we're in the heart of spring right now, and the Spring Spectacular Collection is available now, right now, at the-politicrat.myshopify.com. Please make a beeline to your online portal, if you will, and type in that particular web address. You'll see a lot of great things. I know you'll like them all. So look, I designed all of them. Everything you see is designed by yours truly. And there's so much more to come. Oh my goodness, just got a shipment in the other day. And this Destination series I absolutely am in love with. Destination series. You've really got to check that out. You can search that on the homepage of the-politicrat.myshopify.com. Thank you very much for your support. And by the way, also the newsletter every day, the Politicrat Daily Podcast newsletter, is a newsletter you can subscribe to free of charge, free of charge, free of charge, right now at politicrat.substack.com. Really would appreciate that. People are subscribing and certainly would love to have your name on that list as well. You get the newsletter sent to you every evening, for the most part, sometimes late in the evening and then into the night. But and there's things on that newsletter that I have discussed in the episode for the day, and there are things in the newsletter that sometimes I have not discussed. And there may be links to those particular stories, and there's links to all of the stories, or a selection of them that I talk about, and a selection that I do not talk about. And also there may be extra video, extra audio, video clips from particular things I've talked about, and items I've talked about and discussed, and also latest links to some of the new merchandise that's coming, and a link to the online store, so you can just click on it and take a look and go there directly, and lots more. And usually a compact, condensed newsletter that's not got a million things on it so your eyes are glazing over. It's a newsletter that's clear and clean in terms of the space and the content and being able to discern things. And I thought that it would be a really good idea to do a newsletter rather than put all these links into the liner notes of the episodes. Because I realized that, among other things, that only a few of the platforms that this podcast is on actually do have these clear formatting presentations so that all the things you put there look clean and clear. And then on a number of platforms, they're all jumbled, so you can't see what on earth is going on. And so I think a newsletter would definitely be an effective way to deal with that problem and eliminate that problem. So anyway, there you go. Those are the two things about the podcast that I would like you to pay attention to. Please patronize the store, and also please subscribe for free right now at the daily newsletter that you get. It's politicrat.substack.com. So I just wanted to finish something up about the previous block that I did. And I just want to finish off with, again, from James Baldwin. And he seems to be the only person I quote these days. I mean, there's many other people. By the way, I did quote Ella Wheeler Wilcox at the end of yesterday's episode. So it's not quite true that James Arthur Baldwin is the only person. But he's someone that I think is one of the great... I think he was one of the top 5 or 10 greatest intellectuals of the 20th century. I really do. I think it's the top 5. And you don't normally hear people talking about James Baldwin in that manner, but I do. And by the way, before I get into what I want to say briefly here, I need to tell you once again about his books. Many of you listening are familiar with some or all of James Baldwin's written works. And of course, he wrote so excellently. And roughly a year ago, or maybe a little less than that, I talked often about the books that he has written, or talked from time to time about them and recommended them. I want to do that again since I've been quoting him a whole lot lately. Let me just, for those of you who may not be familiar with James Baldwin's written work, with his work, one of the works you really want to start with when you're talking about trying to explore James Baldwin and his view of the world and his experiences in the world and of the world and how he looks at the United States and looks at the globe itself, is to start with The Fire Next Time. The Fire Next Time. And such an important springboard. Really important work. And I'd start with that one first. There's also Go Tell It on the Mountain. And also Notes of a Native Son. Those are the 3 I would look at. But first I would begin with the really important book, The Fire Next Time. And I do think that's a good segue, because that's a book, I'm not going to give anything away, but it's a manual in a way about life. Not giving anything away. And I think that as I segue over to what's going on here right now with 2 of these cases, that these murder cases, in my view, I am of the belief, and I think people listening, many of you are, or some of you are, that there's no question that Daunte Wright got murdered. He was murdered by that police officer, who, by the way, they've still not released, as of this recording of this episode, they still haven't released that person's name. It's been 48 hours. But you could say that The Fire Next Time was a book written by James Baldwin for Daunte Wright as a young lad. Daunte Wright was a lad. He was a young lad. You know, he hadn't seen the world yet at 20. He hadn't. And, you know, the crux of this episode today is about life, is about how do you mark a life, especially a life that's been cut short and cut short like this? How do you mark a life? When you look back at someone and the life that they lived, how do you properly assess that? Or how do you encapsulate that life when that life is only 20 years old? Or that life is only 5 or 6 or 8 or 12 to Tamir Rice? Or, how do you do that? Trayvon Martin, 16 or 17 years old. How do you encapsulate that life and say, oh, he had a really great life and he was only 16 or 17? Oh, she had a really great life and she was only 26, Breonna Taylor. So how do you do that? And the Fire Next Time is kind of, I thought about this because I wanted to really drive home something that I know that, dear listener, you contemplate these things. Of course I know. I'm sure you do. I would be surprised if you didn't. That how life is so fleeting on this planet and that we have to do better as people, not only in the world, but in our own lives, our private lives, in our daily lives every day. We've got to do better. We've got to try to do the things that we're not happy about ourselves better. We've got to be better people. And as I've often said, we have to do that before we can start talking about, we can do both at the same time. We can try to change ourselves and try to change the world, brick by brick, bit by bit, right? Daunte Wright was going about his business, going about his life. He had a wonderful little boy for a son. He had a girlfriend. He had a mother who loved him. He had family who loved him, and people who cared about him. Just driving and minding his business, and the police get involved. And that's where, we've got this kind of problem. The police. Because the police are not your friendly neighborhood person on the beat. They are this occupying force. And maybe for you, dear listener, you've never had a negative experience with a police officer. You can possibly say very clearly that you've never been stopped by a police officer. You've never been given a ticket if you've been stopped by a police officer. You've never had anyone detain you if you're a police officer. Excuse me, if you're by a police officer, if you're someone in this world. Maybe that's not applied to you. Maybe you've never had I tell you what, I have, as you know now, I've told you, I've been stopped by police. And I would say most every black person has. I would say 90% or 80% of black people out in this world, out in this country have been stopped. And if they haven't been stopped, well, because I don't think every single black person on the planet has been stopped by police or in this country has been stopped by police, but I will tell you, at least 85 to 90% have, in my view. I could be wrong, I could be correct, but I don't think if I was wrong, I'd be far off the exact percentage. And so when Daunte Wright was driving on Sunday, I don't think he had any inkling that this would be the last day of his life, the last day of his 20-year-old life. I don't think so. Do you think he would have had any inkling that this particular Sunday would be the very last day of his life, of his 20-year-old life? Do you think he would even be singing Don McLean's American Pie? Who does that? Who would be singing that? Who would be thinking that they're going to go today? Even all of the people I talk about, or some of the people I talk about here, Dr. King, Medgar Evers, Malcolm X, who knew that death was around the corner for them, and they didn't even get to the age of 40. they never actually said anything about this is going to be the day. I don't think Don McLean's American Pie was out just then anyway. It was a little bit after them, after all of the three of those brothers had been assassinated. So that's really inapposite. But the point I'm trying to make here, however sloppily I'm trying to do it, is that Daunte Wright had everything to live for. And even if some people say, well, he didn't, or if in the world one says reflexively, well, he didn't, or well, someone didn't, they did. They had everything to live for. They had a meaning. When I say they had everything to live for, when Daunte Wright, let me start again. When I say that he had everything to live for, I mean that his whole life was ahead of him. What gives the police the right to take that life? Nothing. And certainly not with someone who is going back into his vehicle, or so the story is. And he's shot, dead. That story does not add up, by the way, right? Think about it now. The story from the Brooklyn Center Police Department in Minnesota is that supposedly the cop whose name, as I said, we still don't know. Hopefully we'll get that sometime before the end of this particular day. I won't be holding my breath. And I hope you don't hold yours either. I don't buy the story about, the officer pulled out a taser, was trying to go for a taser, but instead of the taser, they went for the gun and it was a mistake and it was an accident. And they meant to go for their taser, but they went for the gun and they shot. So wait a minute now. Did you look? See, here's where you poke holes in all this garbage. Did you look at what you were doing? Or did you just grab for something and not look? And here's the thing that gets me. How on earth are you on the police to begin with if you don't know the difference between a taser and a gun? And why is it that you always seem to get confused between those two things when a black person is in front of you? Same thing with Oscar Grant in 2009. New Year's Day, Oscar Grant, here in California, here literally around 17 miles from here in San Francisco. 17 miles away at Fruitvale Station on the BART system, Bay Area Rapid Transit System. On the platform at Fruitvale Station in the early hours of January 1, 2009, Johannes Messerly, white male police officer, did exactly the same thing. Oscar Grant on the ground. He pulls out a gun, bang, shoots him, dead, point blank range. Oscar Grant no longer here. You may remember the movie Fruitvale Station, where Michael B. Jordan so unforgettably played Oscar Grant in the Ryan Coogler debut movie. Now, both of those gentlemen have really gone on to super planes. They've gone on to some really big success. But that was the film that I think really put both of them into the public conscience. And I remember having a conversation briefly during a reception around that time, 2000, whenever that movie came out, 2012, 2013, whenever that movie came out, 14, 15, I don't remember when the movie came out. But the point is that I had a conversation with the director, Ryan Coogler, and we talked about this, and he's from Oakland, Ryan Coogler. All that area is his backyard, basically. And, it was a really good film and really powerful. The performances and the direction and the movie itself was just outstanding. The mother, and I can't believe I forget the actor's name. I forget her name. I think it was Octavia Spencer. It was Octavia Spencer who played the mother of Oscar Grant. She was so memorable. It was such a good film. Painful. But you see what I mean? Is that how do police officers somehow differ? They can't figure out the difference between a gun and a taser. a taser and a gun. They have problems figuring out whether a black person's holding a wallet, Amadou Diallo, or a gun. How come they can't do that? They can't differentiate that. All the so-called training they have, and they can't figure out the differences. But when a white person comes up to them with an axe, when a white person comes up to them brandishing a weapon, when a white person comes up to them with a car and tries to ram it into them, they pretty damn well know the difference. But not only do they know the difference, and not only are they very clear about what's happening, they don't seem to take out their guns or their tasers. In fact, not seem. They literally do not take out their guns. They do not unholster their weapon, and they do not take out their tasers when a white woman is lunging at them with a knife. So how come when it comes to Daunte Wright that somehow, I don't know where my taser and gun are. I don't know where. And I just grabbed the gun. Why is that always happening to us? How come you're not making these mistakes and is it that you're mistakenly doing this because you really aren't making mistakes? Like you're not mistakenly buying a white killer Burger King. You're not mistakenly allowing a white killer who admits to you that he just killed 2 people. You're not mistakenly allowing him to leave the state of Wisconsin. You're not mistakenly allowing a woman lunging at you, a white woman with a knife lunging at you. You're not mistakenly allowing her to keep doing that while you do not subdue her with any kind of gun or stun gun or taser or anything. And you're not doing that mistakenly when you're not mistakenly confronting a white man who's swinging an axe at you. You're pretty damn clear on what you're doing and what they are doing. But somehow you're not with a 20-year-old black boy. Give me a break. It's just really ridiculous. And so you can poke the holes in this story. And then the question becomes, how close is this officer to Daunte Wright? Was this officer to Daunte Wright? How close? How many bullets were really fired? I know the police chief is saying, it was only one. See, when the police chief starts to come out with all this stuff, before we even know the person's name, the cop's name, you really should be thinking very, very closely about what is going on here. Because it is a cover-up. And even if you accept the bologna sandwiches explanation, because I don't, about, it was a taser instead of a gun, and no, it was a gun instead of a taser. Why was the body of Daunte Wright allowed to lie in the street for at least 6 hours? And when the mother is begging the police, when people who know Daunte Wright are begging police, please remove his body from the street. It's broad daylight. We don't need to see everybody walking here and see his body here. We don't need to have his dead body lying out here in broad daylight on a Sunday or any day. Have the decency to respect his memory and either cover up the body or move the body from the scene and cordon the place off. Again, that does not explain that either, right? That doesn't, right? So you've got that happen. You've got this happening. And the holes you can poke very easily in this flimsy story. And again, I think what happens there, even with all of that, and I've not even got to everything about this particular murder, in my view, and the inconsistency already in it, is how are you using a taser for somebody who you supposedly stopped because of air freshener? If you stop them because they got air freshener dangling from their rearview mirror, why does that need a taser? to begin with. Even if you claim that I pulled out a gun instead. Why is it that you're using a gun or a taser for stopping someone for air freshener? There are eyewitnesses to this. Daunte Wright wasn't fighting them. Daunte Wright wasn't posing a physical threat to them. So why are you using a taser? Even if he's driving off, what is a taser going to do? What you do is you call for backup. And this is happening in all of these cases. And whether it's the case with Rayshard Brooks, when I told you about that yesterday, you remember Rayshard Brooks from last summer in an Atlanta area, outside the Wendy's, in the parking lot of Wendy's. And instead of that cop calling for backup, he decided to take matters in his own hands. I don't want to let this one get away. And so I'm going to just shoot him in the back 3 times. And that is Hollywood. But that's also very much America when it comes to black people. In all these cases, the way that these cops resolve things, and these cases are involving black people, is to shoot them in the back, which is obviously illegal. It's obviously murder. It's obviously against every Supreme Court precedent. Tennessee versus Garner. Please look that up. You can go back to Walter Scott in North Charleston, South Carolina, or, in whichever state that was, either North or South Carolina. It was in North Charleston, I think. But whichever state it was in, whether it was North Carolina or South Carolina or Charleston or North Charleston or whichever city, the point is that was caught on video as well. And the cop shot Walter Scott in the back as Walter Scott was running away, a black man, and then planted drugs and planted guns on him and all this stuff. And if it wasn't for a bystander with a cell phone video, we'd never know. And I think Schlager eventually, after 2 trials, was found guilty. A lot of people forget that Michael Schlager, the cop that killed Walter Scott by shooting him in the back at least twice, if not more times, had been, in the first trial, acquitted. It was a mistrial, rather. And I know I'm not going to say anything about George Floyd, the trial of Derek Chauvin in connection to killing George. I'm not going to say anything. But, Schlager had 2 trials. And on the second trial, they got him and convicted him of these charges, of some of these charges, around Walter Scott, murder of Walter Scott, the killing of Walter Scott. So my whole thing is life. How are you measuring it? And the police are measuring it one way. We've got to pull out a taser for this black kid. And you and I are perhaps measuring it another way. I certainly am. I don't want to ascribe what you're feeling and how you measure life and how you measure the life of a black person, how you evaluate it, how you see it. Because you know what my position on this is that I don't think this particular country, and I dare say the UK as well, views black people at all as human. They don't recognize our humanity. I mean, if you're calling a country that doesn't have any institutionalized racism in it, the UK, that report they did a couple of weeks ago, that commission report, if you're saying you definitely don't recognize black people's humanity, and you've got some black fool over here in the United States named Leo Terrell, a so-called civil rights attorney, who's yelling and screaming on Fox News, in quotes, that no, there's no racial discrimination in the United States. There's no institutionalized racism. Jim Crow was dead in 1964. I played the audio of much of that nonsense the other day on the Politicrat Daily podcast. In fact, it was Sunday's episode. But that kind of garbage that you hear from people like Leo Terrell, that you hear about that report from the UK, is the kind of garbage that loves to get clickbait, because it's crap that sells itself. And it is the kind of thing that some people love. And when Leo Terrell shucks and jives for some money to say the garbage that he says, which is why any or most of these people even say this stuff. Some of them actually do believe it, and some of them, like Tucker Carlson, actually do believe it because they are racists. And then there are people who, so he is getting millions of dollars a year for spreading racism and lies and racist dogma and garbage, because he is a racist himself. So he slips right on in. And he's not talented. He's terrible. And shouldn't be on the air spouting racist and misogynist things, especially the racist things he says every day. I don't watch him, believe me. I just see the clips that come across my timeline. And I really should stop watching those. But that's what the whole society does. So it actually makes a cottage industry out of people like this to make money. And it's all about making the money and also promoting the racism and the racists. How do you measure this life of Daunte Wright, though? Really, that's the theme, because it really wasn't a life to live. He didn't have enough of a life. And I'm not saying, and I don't mean that as in get a life, or he had no life, he was a low life, he had no life. No, I'm not saying it like that. I'm saying 20 years. Some people's marriages are 20 years long. So what are you talking about? When you talk about a life, Daunte Wright was just 20. Here's what his aunt had to say last night. Just a little of what she had to say last night on CNN Tonight with Don Lemon.
Sorry for your loss, obviously. A horrible time for your family. We're seeing more unrest on the ground tonight. Your family has been calling for calm. Do you have a message for the crowd out there tonight and people watching?
I'm going to be honest with you right now. All I can think about is my family, what they're going through, what we're feeling. I haven't thought more about what's going on out there on the street. What I've thought about is getting off this road, getting to my brother, getting to my sister-in-law, because my nephew was murdered. I can't think of nothing right now. That's all I can think of is being there, supporting them. And it's hard being that you're at the bottom of the map and you got to come all the way to the top for something like this.
That was the aunt of Daunte Wright, Naisha Wright, and on Don Lemon last night. And quite frankly, again, another reason I don't watch the corporate news media is that there are people who ask some really silly questions and very insensitive ones. The onus should not be about the families calling for calm. That is really a thing that is really ascribed to black people all the time. We're the ones who lose a life. We're the ones who have the police go kill us, right? We don't have them do it. I'm saying, let me rephrase. We are the ones who are getting killed out here by the police. We're the ones who are not getting justice. We're the ones who see time after time after we're being killed and we're losing family members and other loved ones and other people who are close to us and people who aren't close to us. We're losing them in our neighborhoods. And time after time, when it's a police officer, they're not getting indicted. They're not getting indicted. They're not getting arrested. They're not getting named right now. And we're the ones that are asked to be calm, and we're allowed, be calm, be cool, be calm. And this has been going on for 400 years. Be cool, be calm, be cool, be calm. And it's just madness. Don't get angry. Don't be the angry black woman. Don't be the angry black man. Like you're not supposed to have feelings. You're not supposed to have emotions. You're not supposed to experience anger. You're not supposed to experience joy. So you don't like it when I'm angry and you call me the angry black man. And then when we have black joy, you're upset about that too. Do you comprehend what we are talking about here when we say that there is such oppression and anti-blackness in the United States of America. And we are being policed in every aspect. How we wear our hair, what kind of speech we use, what kind of clothes we wear. Whether we are selling water, like a 6-year-old girl was selling water outside her own stoop in San Francisco. Whether a young brother in San Francisco opens up his lemonade stand, Victor Stevenson, who I got to meet a few years ago, and then have 5 police squad cars come up and 5 cops come out with guns drawn at him because some white neighbor who just moved in 2 minutes ago in the Mission District of San Francisco thought fit to call 911 because there's a guy opening up a store. He's opening his storefront with his own keys, so I'm going to call 911. We're being policed in so many ways. And if it's not by police officers, it's by other white people. It's by some white people. Amy Cooper in Central Park. The brother can't even bird watch? Really? So the guy can't go to Central Park and bird watch because your white sensibility gets offended somehow, or the racist tendency you've got spurs you to lie. And by the way, lynch your dog as a warning to this brother, basically, while you're calling 911 and lying your ass off about how this brother is threatening you. And he happens to have the same last name you do. You happen to have the same last name he does. It's like what James Baldwin said, white women have black men killed knowing them to be their lovers. White men have black men killed knowing them to be their brothers or their sons. And he says in that piece I've just said, it's not about a race problem, he says. He says it's about taking responsibility for your own life. And I kind of agree with him. I mean, I think it's both. But I definitely do agree that it's about people wanting to take responsibility for their lives, and they just don't. Some people, particularly the white people that do these kinds of things. I'm going to call the police and make up something and completely lie. And that led to so many black men being lynched in this country to begin with. So we're being policed every second of the day. We walk into a store, I walk into a grocery store, I got people following me. Oh, I've got the store clerk who pretends that they're looking for an item that they just forgot to mark off or something. And they're bending down, look, where's that item? While I'm standing there in the store. We're being policed. We are. Black folk are being policed every second, every day. You're not. If you are someone who's white, you're not being policed every second, every day. When you go to a job interview, you're not worrying about, did I get that? Did I succeed in that? Did I not get that job because I'm white? When you come away from your job interview, that is not what you're thinking. I wonder if they're going to not give it to me. Because the questioning was really hostile, and I wonder if it's because I was white. Is it because they looked at me as a white person and thought that maybe? That's not something you come away with if you're white listening to this. When I go to a job interview in the past, I've honestly had those thoughts about, the way I was being questioned there. And you think about things like this. Oh, is it just because they did this as an obligation or a favor to fulfill some requirement to interview a black person? That's not something that white people ever have to go through. So we are constantly being policed. Constantly. And my whole thing is, when Naisha Wright is being spoken to by Don Lemon, who just is a horrible interviewer. Horrible interviewer. Now, he has good people on that he talks to, but he just doesn't do a good job talking to them very well. He just doesn't know how to do it. And I know that Don Lemon's been around for 30 years and has done some good work, and he's some stuff that I don't really think he registers on the Richter scale for. But when you ask people like Naisha Wright, the aunt of Daunte Wright, 48 hours, not even 36 hours removed from losing her nephew because some cop doesn't know the difference between a taser and a gun, or so we are told. Right. Like that makes it any better. It doesn't. And it's still murder. It's not an accident. They're framing a case to protect this police officer over that 48-hour period that they have to do so. And you ask Naisha Wright something like what you heard, or maybe, what do you think about, or maybe, I don't know if you heard it on that clip, but the larger part of the clip, in case you didn't hear that, in case that was not played, was, there's been unrest, and I know that Kate Wright, the mother of Daunte Wright, has been calling for calm. And so what are your thoughts about that at this time as you see unrest? And I'm glad, to her credit, she didn't take the bait. The aunt said, well, to be honest with you, I'm not thinking about that right now. I'm thinking about my family. We're hurting. And that's really what we're always asked. One of the first things we are asked by any of these media folk is, when we've lost someone in our family to some murdering, kill a cop, the first thing that the black family is asked is, people are upset and angry and there's unrest. What is your response? Do you join your relatives in calling for calm? Like, we always have to be the model calmers of the nation. When we lose a son or a daughter, we have to be the ones to calm everybody down. What about these police calm down? What about these police out here calm down and holster their guns and stop the bullets that they're firing away? And to those who might say, what about the people in the neighborhoods who shoot up places and gangs? Well, wait a minute, let me tell you something. Those people do get punished. They go to prison. They get indicted. Yeah, maybe they get out in a few years, but they do serve time for those crimes. And they are indicted for them. And in fact, in some cases punished by, most cases, obviously a jury of your peers, you're being punished very stiffly and appropriately, I should add, by members of your own community on these juries. So this notion among some people who would really just don't admit that they're racist, that somehow, but you're talking about the police, but you're not talking about black people in your neighborhoods who are shooting. Well, by the way, we are concerned about those things. And that should not be an excuse for you to try to divert the issue. Because you've got the state killing you. That's a freaking problem, folks. Because every community has people who shoot people in their communities. How about all of the white people on this planet or in this country who experience domestic violence and a partner kills that spouse, where that wife gets killed or that husband gets killed because the woman is defending herself and she pulls out a gun and kills him in self-defense, or that husband who's killed his wife and murdered her, not anything to do with self-defense, it's his violence. So please, don't bring that either here. It ain't going to be very welcome. And I tell you, in those domestic violence cases, those men, white men, who do this, and they're black men that commit domestic violence, I'm just talking about this comparison that some of these yahoos try to do, as if to try to sidetrack you and get you off topic. I'll never be off topic, mate. I'll tell you that right now. But how many of those white men get prison time, get real jail time? What What percentage of them get real hard time for this? How many times have I read stories in these newspapers where these folks are getting protection? The police basically serenade them in the friggin' police precinct. And in the intervening months up to the death of this particular white woman, say, I forget which state it was in, the police were awfully nice to her violent, abusive husband and gave him guns, or said that he could carry a gun, rather. And everybody wants to rush to generalize. Well, it's men in general. Yeah, it is. But I'm just talking about in this particular instance. We hate to get specific when it's about us. Some of us. Some people. Hate to get specific. They always want to, well, it happens everywhere else. Well, I'm not talking about everywhere else. I'm talking about this situation. And how many of those white men get really punished for what they do? And it's usually, if they do, it's usually some high-profile case, like a Scott Peterson, right? Who killed his white wife, right? White guy, white woman. He killed her, right? How about Oscar Pistorius? White guy, white woman. He kills his white girlfriend in their home. He's convicted, right? That's usually where you hear these things where they actually get jail time or they get convicted. In these everyday cases, that could be really specious. We don't, I would love to know, because I read a lot of stories where those guys aren't going to jail for anything. And I can tell you that of the small percentage, the 2 or 1% of black people who do this kind of violence to other black folk in their neighborhoods, they're going to prison, folks. They are. And they're doing time. They are getting punished. So I want to put that forth. But we are always told that, we've got to be the calm ones. But we're constantly being policed. As I said earlier, we're constantly being policed. And all these decisions don't go our way. We don't get justice. You're supposed to be calm. Minnesota has a long history of this violence as Minnesota police. And I had been saying that police hadn't come around until really the 1870s or 1880s, really the 1850s, principally. Because actually Minnesota, particularly Minneapolis, their police began roughly 1857 or so. So I misspoke in previous episodes saying 1870s and 80s. It's really 1850s. My point being is that to be asking the aunt of the young boy who was just killed less than 40 hours ago, or whatever hours ago, it's just really, to ask her for calm, to asking her, Naisha Wright, about, well, what do you think? Why is that the case? Why is the media always doing that? And then you turn around and praise them. Oh, they're a model of calm. I mean, what is that paradigm where that's happening? What's your point? And I just want these families to be who they are. And they are being who they are. And instead of these cameras telling them to be calm and all, Why? What if they're not calm? Is it going to be that some white people are going to get upset and now not have sympathy? Why are you telling them to be calm? They just lost their son. How are you talking? How are you, to me that cheapens Daunte Wright's life. Because we care about Daunte Wright. We care about him. We care about Breonna Taylor. We care about her. We care about George Floyd. We care about him. We care about Tatiana Jefferson. We care about her. We care about Sandra Bland. We care about her. So we should be angry. We should be in the streets. And people are so upset about people who are looting. And like I say, I don't condone looting, but that's all system-based. It is all system-based. And what the media wants you to do is think that these black people, they're pathological. There is a peculiar pathology about them. And so, yeah, there's something wrong with them. They're looting. It's a systemic violence that's being visited on them, and that is their reaction to it. Oh, but you're looting in your own neighborhoods. Wait a minute. And where were those neighborhoods, and who created those neighborhoods? Who built the tracts for those neighborhoods? It wasn't us. It wasn't the people who lived there. And then who put environmental toxic waste dumps near those places in those neighborhoods? Who put baseball stadia and sports stadia in those neighborhoods? Who put all of these billboards with smoking and people drinking in those neighborhoods? Wasn't us. Oh, but they're burning down their own neighborhoods. Is it our neighborhood? Did we construct it? Yeah, sure, we live there. Don't mean that we own the place. Don't mean that we built. Oh, but there's black businesses there. And on what terms are they there? What kind of protections did those black businesses get in this pandemic? I didn't think about that. When I say everything's connected, dear listener, I say it with a reason. Because what I do here, and if I may be a bit self-indulgent for a few moments, is to make clear that all of these things are connected. That's one of the things I like to think I do here. But we care about Daunte Wright. We should be angry about Daunte Wright being murdered. And when there's no justice, we should be angry about that. We should take to the streets about that. You don't think Dr. King and Coretta Scott King and you don't think all of these people, Amelia Boynton and Diane Nash, and you don't think they took to the streets? Oh, but they didn't loot. It's not an issue of whether they looted or whether they didn't loot. That is all a reaction to systemic violence that has plagued the areas that they live in for generations. And, are you justifying it then, Omar? I didn't justify a thing. I simply said that is what they're responding to. You can take that or leave it. It doesn't mean that I'm saying, hey, go ahead. Take that television set. I'm not saying that. I am explaining what the reality is. And I am illustrating the history, which is really continuous, as I said yesterday. It's not a question of history repeating itself. I'll repeat that now again. It's not a history. I see people on social media, it may not repeat itself, but it's, I'm like, come on. This isn't about repeats or not repeats. It's about history being continuous. And there are patterns. And when you have continuous history, this is what you're seeing. It is ongoing. These murders of us are ongoing in this country. These murders of us as black people are ongoing. It's continuous. And yeah, I care about Daunte Wright. I suspect that you could. I believe that you care. Dare I be so presumptuous? That you do care that a 20-year-old is gunned down by some cop. And we're told that cop can't tell the difference between a taser and a gun. So yeah, people care. And their love for Daunte Wright and their outrage at a system that has completely told them and treated them as less than nothing and told them that through their systems. Yeah, the outrage at that, yeah, they should be in the street. Absolutely. I'm not supporting them burning things. I'm not supporting them looting things. But that is to be expected when you have your knee in the neck of black people for centuries. And you don't expect that they're going to respond. And then you're telling them to be calm. That's really sick. I think that telling people to be calm after 400 years of this, that's the sickness. You telling them to be calm. There's something wrong with you. Not with them, with you, for telling them to be calm. Why don't you tell those police to be calm? Why don't you tell those police to stand down? Why don't you get rid of their guns? Why don't you have a curfew on them? Curfew on the neighborhood. That's going to help something. You're only going to make the situations worse when you curfew a neighborhood, when you should be holstering them guns in those cops. Holster the cops. Curtail them. Curfew them. I don't want to hear about your curfew in a neighborhood. You didn't even name this cop yet. You don't think that contributes to people getting upset? And they should be upset. We all should be. And we should want to do something with our anger and make sure that these things don't happen anymore. But they're going to keep happening, whether we're angry about them or not, whether we do something about them or not, because there's a system in place. And as long as you have a system in place, you're going to have this. How do you measure a life? The system measures it by the way it treats you. And if you're black in this country, you know how that goes. Trouble, Lindsey Buckingham. Welcome back, and thank you for joining me on this edition of the Politicrat Daily Podcast. I am Omar Moore, and I do appreciate you. Thank you for listening, and it is April 13th, 2021. I hope you're well, and I want to just say a couple of things before getting to day number 11 of the trial of Derek Chauvin, and previewing today's day 12, as we are, it's not really a preview because it's ongoing. So, but I want to say a couple of things really quickly here. And I do want to revisit that question about measuring a life. And I will shortly. So one thing I want to get to is the CDC, or I should say the FDA, which of the acronym soup am I going to be talking about today? Well, it's going to be the FDA. The US FDA put out a statement, and there is, and I'll talk about this in the newsletter, I think, as well, a press conference that happened today as well. But the CDC, the US FDA and the CDC, actually, so I wasn't wrong. It was both of them. They issued a statement today around the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, which I've mentioned here recently. And they are urging and recommending a suspension of this vaccine in the United States. They are recommending a pause. This is from a tweet. In the use of this vaccine as an abundance, or out of an abundance of caution. And those lovely words, abundance of caution, those are words you've heard many, many times. And that's the statement. I'll read it again properly for those of you who didn't really understand what I just said, because I did kind of mangle that a bit. Maybe. I think I did. Today, FDA and CDC issued a statement regarding the Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccine. We are recommending a pause in the use of this vaccine out of an abundance of caution. Now then, the reason why they are recommending this pause, both the FDA and CDC, is because of at least 6 cases, if not more, of women who got the vaccine and have reported getting blood clots, and severe ones at that. And you've heard about this with the other vaccine that's being used in the UK and other parts of Europe, and they've now suspended it, the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, where there have been some blood clots. And then there's been people trying to say, oh no, it's not really that bad, it's just a few cases. Oh, try telling that to the people who have those just a few cases. That it is just a few cases. So, this is a serious thing now. Then the larger conversation becomes, were these vaccines rushed? Some of us were saying that they were. And isn't this about profit? Isn't it? I mean, the basic answer is yes. And you're risking people's lives for it? Yes, that's happened forever. It doesn't make it right, of course. Whether it's happened forever or for the last 5 seconds, it doesn't make it right. But that's the thing. Now it's 2 vaccines now that have been either paused, or there have been worries or recommendations to be paused. And it should kind of set off some thinking for you. And some will say, well, it always happens. There's always going to be some people that get some kind of... But that's not the point. You spent all this time researching and doing this, supposedly trialing all of this. I don't know how carefully people have been trialing it, but obviously maybe not carefully enough, because this is causing people severe reactions. I don't care if it's only. I shouldn't even use that word. I don't care that it's 6 people. Again, it's not about numbers, as James Baldwin said. You don't need numbers. You need passion. It's not about the numbers of people. 1 is too many, as you all know. So that's a really, really significant bit of news. That the Johnson & Johnson one-shot vaccine, everyone, one shot, ooh. And now come to find out that both the 2 foremost agencies in the country, one in terms of food and health, respectively, CDC, one of the world's most respected places. I mean, until the last 4 years, now we're trying to regain that respect among the world community, with Dr. Rochelle Walensky at the helm. Is that you've got these 2 organizations, the FDA and the CDC, who've put out a joint statement saying we recommend that this pause. You can't. We want this vaccine stopped. And Johnson & Johnson, somewhere in the U.S. or wherever else they are around the world, are cringing and saying, "Oh, how dare you!" There is always money to be made. I know that's crude, but it's the truth, and you know this too. So look, I'm going to do some more on this. I'm going to spend a bit more time in the next day or two talking a bit more about what's going on with this. This is a real problem. And it's so important to get vaccinated, so important, especially when you know that hardly anybody in the rest of the world, on the African continent in particular and other places, aren't getting it. I know Australia's getting it. I know New Zealand is. I know parts of India may or may not be. I know that there's parts of other countries and obviously parts of Europe who are getting it, and in the UK and here. And even in all those countries, we're not at 50% vaccination. Not even close. In the US, it's about, 24, 25, 26%. Please get vaccinated. But not with Johnson & Johnson. Because that vaccine, and I heard that Rachel Maddow got that. I was told as recently as yesterday, last night, that Rachel Maddow, and I don't watch this programming anymore. I know, I love to say that, don't I? I don't watch the corporate news media anymore. Like that makes me some whatever. It doesn't make me anything, or it doesn't make me nothing. It just is that I don't watch that anymore. Because I'm sure that there's good. I didn't know there's decent. I know there's good people who work in those places. I'm not doing that. I'm not saying that. Anyway, let me not go into that again. But Rachel Maddow, apparently, I was told, received the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. I wonder what she's thinking upon hearing this news. I wonder what, not just Rachel Maddow, of course, what anybody who has received the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, I wonder what they're thinking, hearing now that the CDC and FDA are recommending an immediate pause. Forthwith, an immediate pause to the use of this vaccine. If I would be terrified right now. Terrified. Literally, and I'm terrified hearing this, although I'm not shocked, because how many times have we seen this scenario of people profiteering and the politics behind it, and vaccinations and stockpiles? Because in this country, make no mistake, the United Kingdom and the United States are stockpiling vaccine, and they're doing it for political reasons and other reasons. And yes, I know the richer countries generally do this, but it doesn't make it right. And then supposedly, hopefully, they will give it to these other countries that they help to make poor. But I do want to and I hope they don't hold but they're going to hold a ransom over these countries to do it. You know that, right? That's the dirty stuff that doesn't get talked about in any media, or most media. In corporate media, definitely not. That they will hold these countries to ransom. Well, if you want this vaccine, you're going to have to do this, and that, and the other. I'm telling you, you don't think the game gets played that way? I know, it sounds cynical, but hey, this stuff does happen, folks. And I think you know that. But I just want to mention that story. I want you to keep your eye on it. I'm going to keep my eye and ear on it. And keep your ear here, because I'm going to be talking about that. And hopefully getting some people on to talk about it too. I really think that's important. And there will be some guests coming, so do not despair. It's not just going to be me you're hearing. There are going to be others too. The last guest I've had on the podcast was a couple of weeks ago now. The two great filmmakers who directed the HBO documentary that they did called Tina Turner. So that was a lot of fun. And there'll be more of that to be had with some other guests, and talking about some fun things and some serious things, as it should be. Because you can't ignore either. But I promise, more guests are on the way. Do not despair. For those of you who are wondering, God, why do I always hear this guy? Why do I always hear this guy all the time? I want to hear someone else. Well, that's why you can go to 2 billion other podcasts. That's my response to those in the world who may think that, or maybe none of you think those kinds of things, but that's okay. But I just wanted to introduce that's an issue to follow. Let's keep our eyes on this one, and I will certainly be doing that. Keeping an ear out for this. So finally, as I said, I want to turn my attention now to day 11. Yesterday was day 11 of the trial of Derek Chauvin, the murder trial of Derek Chauvin, and the defendant sitting there with his suit and tie on, when he really should be sitting there with sunglasses on and a suit and a uniform on, because that's how he was on May 25th, 2020. I understand, and it's a trial. I know, I get it. And you don't want to prejudice the jury by putting him in. I get it. I'm saying this for effect, right? I'm saying this symbolically because I think he should be sitting there with a uniform on. And I talked about that last week. But day 11, yesterday, and again, the prosecution, I think, have been better. Much better than week number 1. Week number 2, which ended last week, I thought they finished with a flourish. I thought they were much stronger. As I've told you, I don't think that has changed at all, has not changed my view of what I think the verdict's going to be. But I do think that the prosecution did much better last week, and they definitely did well yesterday. And I thought that it was very smart of them to put Philoneas Floyd on the witness stand to testify about his brother. It was a very nice personal touch because we hadn't heard from a family member. And I think here on this podcast had openly wondered whether or not Philoneas Floyd was going to testify, because I thought that he would be a really good witness. And I was wondering if the family was. I was kind of back and forth. Should they? Will they? And thankfully, Philoneas did. It really takes a lot of courage to do that, because it's not even yet been a year since George Floyd was murdered by Derek Chauvin. It's not even been a year yet. And for Philoneas Floyd to get up on that witness stand yesterday, as he did, and testify about his brother, it takes a lot of courage. And you can tell, talking about how you measure a life, you can really tell that that family is close-knit and that they really do love each other and care about each other. And there's a warmth to them. And it was really good to see the prosecution introduce that, because I felt that that was missing. I certainly have felt that one of the problems with the prosecution's case is that they didn't really put Derek Chauvin on trial. I mean, they put the Minneapolis police procedures up there, not on trial, but they put that up there. But they didn't necessarily put Derek Chauvin on trial. His character, his predisposition to violence, his 18 complaints in 19 years on the force or thereabouts. I'm sure that the prosecution tried to do that, but the judge, probably Judge Cahill, kept it out. I'm pretty confident that that's probably what happened, because it was going to perhaps prejudice the jury. We can't have these prior crimes evidence things happening. And so I think that's a standard, so that didn't get put in. So the prosecution then has to step up and do more, because, again, beyond a reasonable doubt standard is a very difficult one to do. It's not easy. Even in so-called slam dunk cases, and especially in slam dunk cases where police are involved, because, of course, the police in this country are sacrosanct. They are absolutely sacrosanct. That's how this country views them, as I've talked about over and over. And so they're viewed as absolutely freaking the bee's knees. So the prosecution has to work its tail off, its ass off. The prosecution has to haul ass to push through to that jury that this is a human being. And I talked about this with how you measure a life, and how do those white jurors measure the life of George Floyd as a black person? Do they see a black person's humanity? I said that this trial depends on will come down to whether or not the white jurors view us as black people as human beings. And if they see our humanity, there is a good shot that this prosecution can come out with a victory, and that George Floyd's family can get the justice that we around the world and they have been asking and demanding from day one. The jury is literally still out on all of that. I must say that Philoneas Floyd was really good yesterday. And I'm going to just play you just a few, some portion of some audio from him, because many of you may not have listened to it. I think some people now are probably drifting away a bit from this trial, because I think, a lot of the compelling things happened in week number 1. Week number 2 was the police testifying from Minnesota Police Department, which I thought was quite good, but it was dry as well. And then you had the forensic pathologists come in, and it was really painstaking. Martin Tobin was the one that really lit up last week, if you will, because he was so incisive, and he absolutely reduced Eric Nelson to rubble. Metaphoric rubble and literal rubble. The guy couldn't even speak at one point. And, I have to drink water. And, what witness does that to the defense? And the jury had to have noticed that. So, I talked about that last week here. And this week now, the prosecution ended their case essentially on Monday, yesterday, with the testimony of Philoneas Floyd. And there were others after him who came along. They were all medical people and which were, talking about the injuries were created by asphyxiation, and had the police not treated George Floyd the way they did, George Floyd would be still here. I mean, those kinds of things we all know. But it was still good to have that happen. But I want to, because right now, day 12 is right now, and the defense has begun its case. And the case, by the way, before I do play this Philoneas Floyd testimony that you may or may not have heard, the defense case is underway, and I can tell you that their case is going to be very short, and they're going to put George Floyd on trial, and the prosecution knows this, which is one big reason why they ended their case, or ended their presentation of witnesses with Philoneas Floyd almost at the very end of that witness list. Because they know now that for the next 1, 2, 3 days, the defense is going to make out that Derek Chauvin was somehow an angel who presided over the death of George Floyd rather than the killer that he was. And the defense over these next days, 1, 2, or 3, is going to put George Floyd on trial and make it out that George Floyd is the reason why George Floyd is dead, not Derek Chauvin. In fact, one of my criticisms is that George Floyd has been put on trial in this particular case during the prosecution's case. Because when the prosecutor in the first week, which is one of the reasons I thought the prosecution did so terribly the first week, is that they're interviewing, I almost said Courtney Cox, the actor. Courtney, whatever her last name is now, it escapes me. The girlfriend of George Floyd, put her on the stand asking her about drug use. I thought that was really a problem. I get it. It was a preemptive strike as against the defense bringing it up so that the jury wouldn't be surprised by it. So we're going to minimize the damage on that and bring it up like there's some damage. I mean, I don't care if he had 1 million drugs in his system. Doesn't mean that you sit on his neck with your knee for 9.5 minutes while he's handcuffed, while you've got 2 other officers holding him down. I don't care how many drugs he had in his system. But that's not exactly beside the point, but it's different from the point I'm really making, which is why is the prosecution bringing up his drug use? So what if the defense brings it up? The defense can bring it up. The defense will look mean, in my view. Maybe some jurors' view too. So the prosecution didn't have to bring that up. And I think that was a problem. But again, there's still room for more days of this trial. Of course, we have more of it. And the defense is going to go full bore. That is going to hammer home to this jury that George Floyd somehow was the problem, and George Floyd was the reason that George Floyd was killed by a man who sat on him with his knee for 9.5 minutes. And 2 other officers held him down, and handcuffs held him down, but yeah, he was still the problem for his own death. That's what the defense is going to be telling you. That's what Eric Nelson's going to be telling you these next 2 or 3 days. And then we're going to have, according to Judge Cahill, Monday looks like the day. As I said yesterday, Monday looks like the day. Next Monday, the 19th of April, looks like the day that the closing arguments are going to be made. And the judge yesterday said that he doesn't want the jury to be hearing closing arguments on a Friday, because that means immediately the jury is going to be sequestered over the weekend. And that's not what the judge wants for them. He says that's not going to be a good look. And, it's not going to sit well with you. He even admitted that in court, basically. So what the judge said he was going to do was have the defense and the prosecution have more time to prepare their closing remarks over the weekend, rather than just try to shoehorn them in on Friday and let that play out, so that Monday is the day that you will likely hear closing arguments. And then after that is done, the charge to the jury, and then they will get sequestered the rest of the way, for however long it takes to deliberate. And I will ask you, and I'll ask you now, how long do you think the jury is going to deliberate for in this case? I'm going to put that up as a poll for this episode and tie it in. How long do you think the jury is going to deliberate in this case? Is it going to be hours? Is it going to be 1 day? Is it going to be 2 days? Is it going to be 3 days? Is it going to be a week? Is it going to be longer? Now, let me tell you something. If it gets to a point where it's more than 4 days of deliberation, he is walking. I don't think it looks good. And it might mean that there's some juror that they're trying to work over to get them to unanimously convict or, God forbid, unanimously acquit. But I want to ask you that. I'll ask you it now, but before it gets on Twitter at the Popcorn REL. How long do you think the jury's going to deliberate? I get it. The case hasn't gone to the jury for deliberation yet, but it's going to by the time we get to next Monday. So I want to preemptively ask you that right now before we get to next Monday. But anyway, that's something to think about. Here's something to listen to. I give you Mr. Philoneas Floyd.
That's my mother, but they called her Miss Sissy.
Miss Sissy.
Yes, sir.
Who called her Miss Sissy?
Everybody called her Miss Sissy. We just called her Mom, but everybody around the neighborhood called her Miss Sissy. Anybody that knew her called her that, and that was that. They had to be like 50 years of age, but everybody younger than that called her Mom. That was George's age. Everybody called her Mom because she was a mom to so many people in the community.
What community was that?
That was in 3rd Ward, and I grew up in the CUNY Home Housing Authority projects. It was low income poverty. So we stayed with each other all the time. Me and George, we grew up together playing video games a lot. His favorite game was on Nintendo. We played Double Dribble and we played Tecmo Bowl. And I finally beat him in a game, and I was just so happy just thinking about that. And he reset the game and would say, "Come on, let's play again." And I'd be like, "No, I gotta go do our chores now. Let me do my chores." But George also, he used to make the best banana mayonnaise sandwiches, and he used to make syrup sandwiches because George couldn't cook, he couldn't boil water. So, and also if you all were there in our house, you'll see George had lines on the wall because he will always measure with his height, trying to see how tall he is, because he wanted to be taller all the time because he loved sports. So he always wanted to be the best. And he was talking to her over the phone, but she perished before he even came down here. So that right there, it hurt him a lot. And when we went to, he had received a scholarship to attend South Florida College. And from there, he played basketball there, and he transferred to Texas A&M Kingsville, where he played football.
All right. Now, I'd like to show the witness Exhibit 285 for identification. Sir, do you recognize what's shown in Exhibit 285?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Is that a picture of your brother when he was at the Jack Yates High School in Houston?
Yes, sir.
Offer Exhibit 285.
Any objection? 285 is received.
And permission to publish. Approximately how old would George Floyd have been when this picture was taken?
It looked like 18 or 17 at that time.
And you talked about basketball and playing basketball. If I can show Exhibit 287 to the witness. 287. Thank you. All right, showing you what's been marked for identification as Exhibit 287. Do you recognize this photo?
Yes, sir.
Is there a picture of your brother in this photo?
Yeah, he's number 5, South Florida, all the way in the left-hand corner.
All right, I'm going to offer Exhibit 287.
Any objection? 287 is received.
And permission to publish. All right, you indicated that your brother was number 5. Is that on the far left?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And South Florida, was that a community college?
South Florida was a community college. I'm looking at it. I noticed a whole bunch of the ball players because I met a lot of them coming up.
Did George Floyd maintain his level of fitness and love of basketball throughout his life?
Yes, sir. He loved to work out. He loved playing basketball. He loved teaching people the game of basketball. That's, to me, where I really learned how to play from him, because he guided a lot of guys on the court and showed them what they need to do to be better.
And when he would talk about playing basketball, would he use any particular term or phrase?
Oh, he said, "Hey, man, let's go hooping." And we will always say, "Come on, let's go." We always went hooping, and you have to hoop every day, because if you don't go and shoot a whole bunch of shots, like 50 to 100 shots a day, my brother will always say, you'll never be able to compete. Hooping was big because Magic, you had to watch the stars. We watched Michael, we watched Magic, we watched everybody hoop every day.
Oh my goodness. Philoneas Floyd, remembering his brother and remembering the times they had and remembering George as a basketball player, and he loved to play athletics. He was an athlete. He was a father. He was a human being. He lived. And it was so brief, his time on the planet, George Floyd, but my goodness me, there's a family there. There's love there. He had love. He was loved by his community. Loved. And it's not a question of humanizing him. He is human. It's about a society that dehumanized him, and a society that was dehumanizing him and all of us who are black in this country. And it's about the police, 4 of them, who didn't value or respect George Floyd's humanity, including the principal murderer, who is the defendant on trial here, Derek Chauvin. And that makes all 4 of those cops inhumane. If they and anyone else and a system do not and cannot and will not see or respect the humanity of black people, that makes all of them and the system itself, by definition, inhumane. Elton John with Song for Guy. And, really, I want to say song. I want to say Song for George, because I don't think Elton John would mind that too much if I substituted. Although I should just add, by the way, for those of you who don't know, and I'm a huge Elton John fan, I got to meet Elton John roughly 40 years ago, if not a bit longer ago than that. At Vicarage Road at Watford, of course, the Watford Football Club in England, that he used to be the chairman of, I might add, in the 1970s and into the 1980s. But Song for Guy, by the way, is a song that actually was dedicated to a 17-year-old boy named Guy Burchett, and how his life was so untimely ended in such a violent way. I think he was involved in a car crash or a motorcycle crash or a bicycle crash or something. And it just so happened that Elton John happened to be writing a song. And I don't know what the song was going to be about, but from what I know, what I understand, and I think he's mentioned also in Elton John's written about this too in his autobiography entitled Me. One of the things I think he points to, if I remember correctly, is that he was writing a song, and literally this horrible accident happened. And apparently I don't know if this 17-year-old named Guy Burchett was working in conjunction with Elton John, or if he was working for a company that Elton John had connections to, or if it was just that he was a messenger for the company he worked for independently of Elton John. But Elton John was inspired to dedicate the song that you just heard, the instrumental, because it's an instrumental that you heard, to Guy, as in Guy Burchett, not Song for Guy as in a generic guy, but a guy, this person, a human being named Guy Burchett. And so I would like to, with, I'm sure that Elton John won't mind, Song for George. You know, maybe I should put together something. I can't play the piano. I could try, I could learn, I could take lessons in it. Nina Simone is no longer here. She was classically trained, by the way. She trained herself as well. I think she is self-taught, Nina Simone, on the piano. Played beautifully. My goodness me. I don't think she gets enough credit for her musicianship. She was an excellent musician too. And Elton John is as well. And Song for Guy, I remember that song back in the mid to late 1970s. And it was in 1978 or thereabouts, or 77, when this horrible accident happened. Might have been a bit before 77. But Song for Guy is one of my favorite Elton John tunes. And I really want to call it Song for George. Song for Daunte, you know. Daunte was just 3 years older than Guy Burchett. You know, Song for Tamir. Tamir Rice was 5 years younger. Than Guy Burchett, you know? Song for Brianna. I mean, you know, you get the idea. So, there we go. You know, that's Elton John with Song for Guy there. And so, it's here we are on Tuesday, a lot going on. The defense case is underway. We will see what Eric Nelson comes up with here. Apart from what I said, I don't think too much, except for 3 days of bashing a dead man, which is really let's just have it right. Eric Nelson has spent 3 weeks doing that. And there was only one day where it seemed he came out a little bit ahead, but that was only because, not by bashing George Floyd, I'm talking about where he poked in some reasonable doubt holes, because the prosecution had been so bad on a couple of these days in that first week that because they were so bad, that actually elevated how Eric Nelson, as poor as he has been. But I think the thing to look out for is that, the reasonable doubt may not be there for this jury. And those are the only 12 people in the world whose opinion counts. Seriously. And once they give their verdict, it will be all of our opinions that will count even more than the jurors. But for these next few days, through the deliberation phase, through the verdict phase, that jury counts. They're the only 12 people on earth who have the power to either say guilty to Derek Chauvin or not guilty to Derek Chauvin. And I am praying and hoping that they say guilty to Derek Chauvin on everything. Or on as much as they can, everything, really. Everything. I get it. Sometimes perhaps where the way this gets charged and how the judge does this, maybe that because there's this charge and that charge, maybe there is a way that you can't necessarily find him guilty. But you should be able to find him guilty in all three of these. The world knows that. But the 12 jurors, the world is not in that courtroom, to borrow a line and paraphrase it from Denzel Washington in the film Philadelphia, Jonathan Demme's film in 1993. But we are not all living in this courtroom, are we, Your Honor? There's a moment in there where Tom Hanks is playing someone who has HIV, and Denzel plays the bigoted lawyer who finally comes around, takes his case, and begins to understand and learn and about homophobia and to lessen his own homophobia. And he's gaining this kinship and this, this friendship in a way with Tom Hanks, a guy whose character he wouldn't go near at the beginning of the movie Philadelphia. It's worth watching that movie again. It's a heartbreaking movie. I don't think it's the best movie in the world, and I think that although Tom Hanks was good, I didn't think he should have won an Oscar for that performance, although I know lots of people will vehemently disagree perhaps, but I think that there's other work he's done that was even better than Philadelphia. Although I'm not begrudging his performance, I thought it was a really good performance, don't get me wrong. He was very good. I should kind of dial that back a bit about him. But the point is that we don't know. We don't know what this jury's going to do yet. We can predict, like myself, yours truly, all we want. I can say all I want about what I think they're going to do. But I do not know. And nor do you. Which is what makes these next few days, well, gripping, in a word. Suspenseful. In 2 words, that's the second word. We'll see what happens. Thank you very much for listening to this edition of the Politicrat. I'm Omar Moore.